Hey, welcome to the first episode of what will hopefully become an ongoing series of me documenting work on my open source FPS, which I'm going to be calling Project Isolation for now. You did hear right, I did say open source. You're actually free to download and use all the code that I detail in this video, and you can find the link to that project on my GitHub in the description below. So let's get right into it. What is Project Isolation? Well, as I've already mentioned, it's a first-person shooter, and it's set in the post-apocalyptic future where, stranded alone in a giant, dense valley, it's down to you to figure out how to escape. When I started writing out design documents and ideas for the game roughly 6 months ago, the core concept was a sense of exploration and discovery, partially inspired by games like Outer Wilds. But I also wanted the game to feature a challenging combat component inspired by games like Far Cry 2. Fundamentally, though, as the name suggests, it's meant to be a game about intense loneliness, which is something that I and I think quite a few other people have been feeling a lot over the last 2 years, or in my case, especially in the last 6 months. And so I suppose building this game is really a way of expressing and or coping with that. At the same time, I do just really want to make a cool game, so maybe I'm digging too much into it. I'm going to be using Unreal Engine for this project, and so I started with an empty project, because using templates is for nerds. I'm just going to go ahead and yoink all the movement code from my previous project, a little game called Fall Blau. This gets us a very, very simple movement system so that I can move around, look up, down, and even, wait for it, jump. The first step for me was figuring out a weapon system. It's naturally the center of any first-person shooter, so I was eager to get started with it. I wanted to build a single C++ parent class that can be used for every single weapon in the game. It ends up simplifying a ton of stuff to do with weapon handling, but it does mean figuring out every single possible weapon feature I wanted to go into the game before writing, and then actually going through and writing all of the weapon code. It took me a little over a week working alongside my university courses to get everything written to my personal satisfaction, and you can see just how many variables each weapon class has, letting me, and you, customize these weapons right down to the details. Project Isolation relies a lot on its weapon variety as a core mechanic and means of helping to make combat interesting, so it was definitely a focus for me, and I think it was really important to pull it off well. With the weapon code written, I focused on ammunition. Ammo is tricky in games because you can't handle it within the weapon itself. If you do, as soon as you swap weapons, the ammo gets deleted, and when you swap back to that weapon, the ammo gets reset to its default values. You could just hide the weapon and keep it spawned, and that would solve this problem, but it's incredibly ugly to work with, and it gets even uglier the more weapons you add, not to mention wasting computer resources. I decided to store ammo in the character controller, since it's pretty easy to access, will always exist, and is outside of the player class, which I'd like to reserve for movement-related stuff. You could of course store this anywhere though. I mean, as long as it exists in the world and you can cast to it from your player, it doesn't really matter. I'm using structs, maps, and enums here to store the variables. Our enum defines the 4 weapon classes that which weapons can be part of, which determines the ammunition that they use. Then, our struct specifies the data that we need for each weapon, and finally, we assign that to a map with the key of all our possible blueprint classes derived from our weapon parent. Here's how that looks in blueprints. As you can see, we can pick a weapon class to add to the system and then fill out all the variables. After this, I took about a week to rewrite the game's movement code after having dug through the FPS animation blueprint asset from the Unreal Engine marketplace. It's designed for blueprints, so I took some elements and rewrote them in C++ while adding certain features from the previous movement system into the mix. For those wondering, I'm also currently using the animations from this UV4 asset. I'm not a great animator, and the more time that I can save with procedural ones, the better. That's about it for the code I wrote during the first month of development. I spent some time making assets for the game, as well as the very beginnings of some of the game's soundtrack. There's also some more stuff that I can't show you yet that I'm working on for the story and future mechanics. To summarize, let's take a look at what you can actually do in the current version of Project Isolation. So, as you can see, here's the current version of the project. You can run around, you can slide, you can jump, you can kind of do all the movement stuff that you'd expect. And all the kind of weapon mechanics are in place too, although you can't really see a lot of them because a lot of the actual models and animations haven't been developed yet. Those will come a little bit later. But rest assured, there's a ton of depth to these weapon mechanics. That's about it for this month. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe even learned a little something along the way. If you do want access to all the code, it's public on GitHub in the description. Also, leave links for the 2 Trello boards where you can follow future progress on the game. And if you've got any questions or want to know how I did something, feel free to ask in the comments. Thanks for watching, and happy development.